Hello, in this recording, we're going to do a demo of the new feature for the compensation module in SAP SuccessFactors as part of the second half 2024 release, which allows us to control the executive review access of specific roles based on the step of the workflow that the worksheets are in. And we can do that template by template and it's dynamic, so it applies while the worksheets are in the system. So I'll give a quick recap for anybody who's not very familiar with the compensation module that I think is important to understand the difference between executive review and the workflow. So compensation is a manager-centric module, which means we create a worksheet for a planner. It can be the line manager in the org chart or a specific custom manager that was loaded by the customer. And then this worksheet, once it's created, it will move from one step to another step. For example, this would be where we actually check the data, make sure all the right people are showing. Then we'd have the manager entering recommendation. Then it would be validated and maybe edited temporarily. Potentially by the next level manager. And then in the final review, we'd have the worksheets come back to the comp administrator step, and then the CEO, the C level would make final calls on the changes based on the budget and then complete it. And in parallel to this, we have executive review. And executive review is a way to give access to specific groups of people on a wide scope. So it kind of breaks the logic of one worksheet for one manager that's being routed from one form inbox to another and allows us to give specific people access to a large scope of employees so that they can filter. So we're talking thousands, hundreds. We have a way to use the legacy roles from the success factors. For example, if you are in a job relationship with an employee and you are listed as their HR business partner, then automatically we can have these accesses open up for you so you can see anybody who is eligible to the comp process that is your HR reports, or we can give access to managers on their team. So for example, when we get to the next level manager review, we don't want like a next level manager to have to open 5 or 6 or more different worksheets to be able to submit. So in that particular case, we would allow that manager to have executive review access so they can see everybody on one page to be able to make changes. So that was a quick introduction to how compensation is articulated. Now, before this release, in order to trigger these executive review access to the right people at the right time based on where we were at the workflow, we had to request a change to the security administrators of SuccessFactors, so the role-based permission administrators, which are usually separate from the comp administrators. And so the comp administrators would have to say, okay, now I'm entering my next level manager review or my final review. Can you please open up executive review to the group presidents all the way down and stop executive review to the managers, for example. We don't want them to necessarily or make it view only when they were able to edit, but now the worksheets are all into the final review, so we want them to be able to only view and not be able to edit anymore. And to do these changes dynamically throughout the cycle, comp administrators would have to reach out to create a ticket to their security team, and so security would come to RBP, which is here in this demo environment, and would click on the right role that's named by the comp administrator in the ticket, and would say, okay, I need to switch this from view to edit only, for example, which you can do by clicking here and you go into the permissions and then you basically switch. There's like a permission called executive review, and you would switch this from edit to view, for example. Um, and so now, instead of having to have administrators do it on behalf of comp admin, security administrator, we can control it ourselves as comp administrator. All we need to have are roles that are clearly defined in role-based permission. And so I've always advised that customers create specific roles for whoever they want to be able to access executive review that are different from the rest of the roles that give access to employee central fields and specific modules, just so that we can quickly find them and quickly turn the permissions or the whole role to inactive if we need to, which is why I've designed it in a way that is the way I would advise customers to build executive review access. So the three roles that are here, we're going to find them here. And the way this new feature has been built is that basically the product team built an API between each of the template that is for which we made this new feature available, because we can turn it on by template, and RBP and the security module of SuccessFactors. So I'll give you an example. So if I take a random role here, for example, this one, apprentice supervisor, right? So I go in here and I click on edit the role. So this is the new interface for RBP. And I go to the permissions for comp and variable pay to be able to see executive review, edit, and read here for both comp and variable pay. And I then do next and I save. Immediately as soon as I save, because there's an API that detects from within the comp module which roles are granting access to a particular template. And in this case, I selected a role and I said all templates, so it would apply to my 2024 salary review. So if I just do a refresh, which I'll do by leaving and coming back, as soon as that happens, I can see the role show up here, right? So it's live as soon as permissions are given. So I'm going to remove this to make my demo, actually. I'm going to revert the change. I think it will confuse anything. I just wanted to start there to make sure we understand how things are built, but I'd rather have only the right roles that I want for my demo. So I'm going to revert this change, save. Okay. So now let's do a quick demo. So I have a form here, and so it's 2024 salary review, and I have about 342 worksheets, 1,078 employees overall pool that are eligible to this cycle in this demo environment. And as we can see, the worksheets are all in process setup. Now, a common requirement we get from customers is that as part of the process setup, the first step within process setup is that comp administrator, which is me in this case, I'm logged in as comp administrator, would access executive review and obviously check that there isn't like obvious data missing in some columns or something really wrong. So comp admin would do the basic checks, but then before we open up to manager planning, a common request is to have HR in different areas validate that everything is actually correct, that the right salaries are there, and they would do that by filtering in executive review, making checks versus maybe different databases they have or different information, and then confirm to comp admin that everything is correct, and then we can launch and send the worksheets to manager planning. So now with this new feature, what all we have to do is, as long as we have a compensation RBP role that is defined in our RBP, all we need to do is we'll start here, because that's the step, that's how it should be starting, because we are in the step of process setup, but we are in the step where we comp admin, we're just making sure everything is good from a system perspective. There are employees pulled into the worksheets. We've applied the eligibility rule. The obvious people that should be excluded are not there, things like that. But then we want HR to do like a more granular fine tuning of the scopes. So we'd start here, and here I want to highlight this no permission. No permission is important because in this particular case, it really means that there isn't going to be anything granted to particular HR. So if I take an example, for example, here, and I go and log in as one of my HR, and because he has no permission here, what this means is that when I proxy and I do as one of the HR, his name is Richard Mueller in this environment. So proxy restriction alert, and because he has no permission, even though he's been granted access through RBP, right, to our template in edit mode, because I have this feature, this new feature turned on, when he goes to compensation, he will see the link to compensation review slash executive review. It's called comp review here. He will see 2024 salary review, but because we say no permission, then there's no employees pulling into the scope of this HR. This HR person, BP, I think has about 170 people reporting to like as HR reports overall. So let's do an example now and go back to our comp template and grant permission in view only to this HRBP. So that's the beauty of this new feature is that it's all dynamic. Um, so we go back here to comp home and we are going to trigger it to be dynamic. Sorry, I meant trigger it in a dynamic way. So we click in edit and now we're going to say, okay, give HR business partners access to their scope of HR reports. And so to do that, I need to first switch this, which is for applies to all route steps, to from no permission to permission. And so I would either select no selection and switch back to no selection here, and then just give in read only. But what's mostly going to happen is that we want HR business partners to be able to view throughout the whole cycle. That's the most common requirement, at least from my experience in customers, is that we let managers make recommendations, but we want HR to be able to see on their HR scope what is actually happening. So in this particular case, either we do here read only um, at the step level that we want, or we do it for the whole thing. And one thing to take into account to be very careful with is that if you do this, no selection here for all route steps, then read only here, process setup, but you do no selection. The thing is, no selection means that no selection is different from no permission in the sense that if you have no permission, it means you can't see anything. But if you have no selection, if you leave it to no selection, then what has been granted to you as a scope in RBP applies. So by no selection basically means give this role the same access than it's been given in RBP. So in this case, what would happen if you leave this to no selection is it would be read-only in process setup for the HR people, business partners. And then because you left it to no selection, they would be able to edit in the manager planning phase once the worksheets get routed to manager planning. And that's not something we want. So we got to be very careful and understand that no selection actually means that it's going to give the role the same access than in RBP. And in RBP, in what I designed, I gave access in edit only so that they're not confused by, I don't know if some of you are familiar, there's like a drop down where you can say people I can view, people I can edit. I would recommend like with this new feature, like there's no, if you control correctly from here, there's no reason to do people I can view unless you really want to make sure a role can never ever edit and prevent this type of situation. In this case, what we're going to do is just do read only for all the steps. And as soon as I do that, I don't have to go back to RBP. As soon as I do that, it's been updated here. My HR, if I proxy as him, in the executive review, will have the entire HRBP scope pulled. We can see 177 employees automatically here. And one last thing I want to show you is because in the way we design the roles in RBP for my HRBPs, because of the way I designed it to have access to, oh, I think it expired here because I proxied in the other tab, but that's fine. Because I designed it there to have in RBP to have edit access by default, I'm able to, the granularity of this new feature allows us to actually apply a view even though the RBP permission says edit and only edit. we can say this new feature to control executive review based on roadmap step, that when we select view versus edit, it will also override what is in RBP. So that's a good example. I gave HRBP access in RBP edit mode, but I selected in the new feature view, and because of that, this HR cannot edit anything. And so let's go back to myself, and then we'll make a change, quick change to uh, to the to the feature to say edit and proxy again as this HR, and see that now Richard Miller, the HR, can edit. So I go back to comp home. I click on here role-based permission based on route steps. I do edit, and now let's say I wanted I wanted them to be able to edit something, maybe like a default recommendation in Merit potentially if they find anything to say about that. So I would say maybe maybe no selection here, and I would say so I have to be careful, because if I don't want them to be able to only edit in this step but not the other steps, then I'd do this, read only, read only. Remember, no selection means whatever is in RBP will apply, so we have to be very careful. And then read only, and now save. And because I'm doing this here, edit, read only, when I save and I go back as Richard, and because in RBP I granted Richard edit access, he's going to be able to actually edit the recommendations, merit, lump sum, adjustments in the screen. So we're going to confirm that. And I think with this example, I think we understand, like, gives a sense of the level of granularity we can apply to the comp cycles now without relying on any ticket to security. So I go here and as my HRBP, and as soon as I click on 2024 salary review, I can now edit the recommendations that are made. There's probably a guideline with the default value, so I can change here from 2 to 3 and so on, and lump sum as well. So that's percent. That's a lot of that's a high percent. So yeah, so and save. So let's go back now that we've really demoed it, and add a few, maybe call a few things in the way this works. So one of the things is that it's a restrictive feature in the sense that if there are several roles in RBP that grant access to someone to the executive review, if you're using this particular feature, and let's say one person, let's say for example me, comp admin, if let's say I'm being granted access in edit mode to all employees in the company for this 2024 salary review, but at the same through the role called comp admin, right? But at the same time, I'm also part for some reason of another role in RBP called HRBP or something like that, that gives me access only to my HR reports because somehow I was added as an HR. Well, this feature is only going to give me the most, if I select, read only for process setup or edit, it's going to only show me the smaller scope. I had this issue when I was preparing this demo yesterday where actually this exact situation, this exact example happened. I was in two roles, and instead of seeing 1,000 people, which is the max scope as part of this cycle, I was seeing 11 people. And so I go into view permission for a comp administrator for the role, for my actual user that's tied to this RBP role of the same name. And then I saw I was in two different roles, and so I reached out to our product team, and they said, yeah, so it's a restrictive feature. If you turn it on and someone is in different roles, the way it works is it only gives the smaller scope. So in that regard, it's important to, if you're planning on using this feature, it's really important to fine-tune your RBP role, and as per my recommendation and the leading practice recommendation, make sure they are in different roles, and that as much as possible people don't have there's no overlap of permissions between the role for different people. So that's one important thing. And then I think one last thing is that yeah, if the steps of the worksheet of the route map, sorry, that are tied to this particular plan are edited, if you go after the worksheets are created, if you go to edit route map and for some reason you change the steps, then it's probably going to break the design that you made here. So it's something that is being called out in this red error message. It's something worth keeping in mind. But that's about it. I think this feature is amazing. I'll give a business example which led to a lot of discussion when we first talked about this feature about a year and a half ago. We were doing an implementation for a customer and a large implementation with about 100 countries and about 6 or 7 different templates with different configurations, completely different, with about 3 different timelines. So there was going to be a full-time comp admin team or almost full-time that would work throughout the year on administrating the compensation module. And so if you can imagine, it's for different countries, different continents. You have to constantly reach out to your security team, which is a different team, to request the accesses. That was before this new feature, and now you're completely free. As long as you configure correctly and you understand how it worked, you can really trigger it the way you need and run things smoothly on the comp admin end. So I hope this was helpful to understand. So if to finish on the example, so what would happen is, so let's go throughout the process. So we said in the example process setup here, I open to my HR business partners, but I would actually open the edit was just an example to show how dynamic it was. I would probably do this, and then as worksheets get routed to the manager planning step, then we would open up. So as they get routed, or before they get routed, actually, we could say, actually before, that's what we should do. We could say no selection here, and then we would do process setup, no permission. We don't want managers to see anything in process setup. We only want them to see quality data that's been checked by comp admin and HR. But here we want them to be able to edit on their team and potentially also their next level manager can edit. And here we'd say edit as well. So for these 2 steps, we'd say edit. But then final review, it would be read only because now it's in the hands of this group of people. And then once it's completed, we would say read only here. Then save. And then we'd say, so if we do another edit, we'd do no selection here for group president, COO, and CEO. And we do process setup, we'd say, maybe we want this group of people to see everything throughout. So, and not in process setup, but maybe while manager planning is happening, read only, and then during final review, we'd give them edit access, and then read only. Once everything's completed, it's completed, and that would be our permissioning for this new feature. So I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening. Don't hesitate to ask questions on the community blog if you encounter any issue or anything that you're not sure. Thank you. Bye bye.